I'm Will, I'm from Humble Audio, the makers of the quad operator. I kind of got into modular as a start because, you know, instead of building a whole product, you can just build some oscillators or a filter or whatever. So it's a little less, you know, a little less of an undertaking for a start. And, you know, I was kind of wandering around trying to find a good, worthy idea for a while, and then sort of landed on the FM thing. I realized that I think, you know, like I was really inspired by the way FM8 in particular exposes its modulation matrix and kind of gets away from the algorithms concept that's sort of, you know, oddly seems to be baked into everyone's concept of what FM is, because I think the early, you know, the DX series did the algorithms thing, so that's now what everyone does. But it doesn't need to be the case. And then, you know, FM8 was like sort of this aha moment for me in terms of building an intuition around what FM actually does and how modulating more or less changes the sound. Or that was kind of the inspiration here, really, is to like just try to build a digital module that has a really analog feel and gives you just enough of the sort of space of parameters to express what FM really is and does. And hopefully what we're doing here is just kind of distilling FM down to its essence and giving you the sort of most basic set of things you need to understand what FM does. It's really just 4 oscillators in a box with modulation, and then some interesting ways to apply CV to that, you know, you can get your classic FM architecture. You can, of course, do any of the crazy modulation you can do with a modular system. And yeah, you know, you can dial in those classic bell sounds, any of those classic FM style DX preset type sounds. But I think in the modular format, you know, you get to the point where it's just a lot more fun to kind of experiment with modulation relationships and CV and just hit record and kind of see what happens. FM is basically a technique for synthesis where you just start with like 2 sine waves, and a sine wave is just a pure tone, like a tuning fork or just something really single frequency. And most instruments, most synthesizers start with you know, a harmonically rich waveform. That's what we sort of call subtractive synthesis, and then we remove overtones with a filter. FM kind of works the other way around. It starts with a sine wave and then it perturbs one sine wave with another, and that actually turns out to generate harmonics. That's the essence of frequency modulation right there. We take a pure tone and then we change its frequency very quickly with another pure tone, and that has this sort of magical effect of generating overtones. And depending on the sort of frequency relationships between those pure tones, you get different structure. You can also do things where you vary the amount of perturbation or modulation over time, and that can add harmonics and then remove harmonics in sort of a moving manner. So that's sort of the essence of FM. So we're using, I think it's an Erica synths or Pico drums just for a kick and a little vocal sample, and then a plates for a little percussion sound, which we've added some delay onto with the dual effects from Erica, and then we'll just have sort of a little synth line going with the quad operator, and we'll just kind of be tweaking the modulation relationships a little bit.
There's something up, 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 there's something up.
We have envelopes that are looping coming into each of the gain inputs on each of the operators. So, and you can see the gain levels indicated here by these green LEDs. So we've sort of got envelope 1 moving kind of slow, and that's affecting the output volume. And then we're going to use operator 2 to modulate operator 1 by turning this knob here. Now we've also got an envelope applied to gain 2, which you can see here, so you get kind of a feel for how the tone changes as this modulation kind of moves up and down. You can speed that up a little bit. It's getting a little too fast, and it's getting a little, you're hearing the envelope edge there, but. So that's also, I should add, at a 1-to-1 operator ratio. So we can change the ratio, ratio of any given operator relative to the master tuning, which is just sort of walking through stepped values, and you can kind of hear how that will affect the tone. So at 12 o'clock you've got times 1. To the right, you've got multipliers up to 11, I think. And if we turn to the left, we got dividers, so we can get a subtone. And it turns out if you use a subharmonic as a modulator, it will add subtones into your carrier, which is, in this case, the carrier is operator 1. So that's your basic 2-operator FM synthesis right there, and everything else builds around that. So now I can take operator 3 and modulate operator 2. Now we're not hearing the output of 2, we're hearing the output of 1, but 3 impacts the shape of 2, impacts the shape of 1. So that's sort of how you're getting a more complex sound. Now we can also use 3 to modulate 1 directly if we want. It's a little different sound, similar but a little different, or we can do both. And then I'll just mess with the envelope on 3 here a little bit too. Now in a classic kind of DX style architecture, you're generally not going to have looping envelopes. You will have an envelope per gain signal on each operator. You'll generally like trigger those with like a MIDI on or off or from a sequencer or whatever. So if that's what you're going for, I would suggest, you know, sending gates into like the quad envelope or whatever your favorite quad envelope is. What else can we do here? We can also, some outputs of operators, you'll see that in many algorithm diagrams. So we're gonna take the envelope off of 4 here. So this is just gain high all the time. And we're gonna take operator 4 output and put that into our mixer here and turn that up. And then we're gonna just kind of like add a subtone in there. Now we can apply some detune if we want to get, so at 12 o'clock detune will leave you perfectly phase locked, which is important for FM. But of course detune is interesting too, so we can let it warble a little bit. So you can get some really nice kind of textural droney stuff going. And then I can also of course use a detuned operator to modulate another operator. So we're modulating 2 with 4 here by turning this knob. And then that is in turn, 2 is modulating 1. So we're sort of warbling the sound of operator 1 through this modulation. And just for comparison, we can turn that all the way down. We're still hearing the warble of the summing, but we can maybe add some direct FM to output 1. So you're getting some extra kind of tonal character out of that. Let's apply both, why not? And then just to kind of demonstrate the algo for you, maybe I like this modulation relationship I've designed. So I'll press and hold until this blinks twice. And now I've saved that modulation into the A slot. So I can now take this all, mess with it. And currently we're listening to live, but I can take a left and a right and then crossfade back into A, my saved A. So while I'm over here on A, I'll just go ahead and design some other modulation. Maybe we'll get gnarly. We'll add some self-modulation, something really noisy. I'll come back to self-modulation and cross-modulation a little bit, but we're not hearing this right now because we're listening to the sound as controlled by the algorithm A. And then we're just going to kind of dial something a little crazier here. And then we're going to crossfade back into live. So we're starting to hear some aliasing there, which is, but by design, you actually want aliasing in an FM synthesizer. For many sounds you don't want it, but it's basically your source of noise in a patch. So we've got something that's pretty noisy here. Maybe we'll just back it down a little bit. So we've got cross modulation going on. That'll generate noise. We've got operator 1 modulating 2 and operator 2 modulating operator 1. So we can turn that all the way down. Now in this setup, we've also got self-modulation, operator 1 modulating itself. That's also going to generate noise. So if you're wondering why your patches are sounding incredibly noisy, it's probably because you've got either some cross-modulation or self-modulation going on. But you know, if you're trying to design hi-hats, you want that. So just to give you an idea. And you can get some really interesting kind of textural things going when you just kind of nudge into that aliasing boundary a little bit. maybe process it through something else, a distortion or other effects. It can be really potent. And now I'm going to crossfade from this new design back into my original algorithm. Cool. So that's basically FM in a nutshell for you. Other particular features of the quad operator. It's a traditional oscillator bank, so of course you've got master tuning. You can switch it into LFO mode and use it as a complex modulator. Pitch CV, low frequency FM for pitch envelopes or vibrato type effects. A reset, which is helpful when you're using it as a modulator, especially I think, to sort of trigger the modulation with a gate. We've also got, we've got CV for ratio and shape. I should back up a little bit here and show you the shapes a little bit. So we're going to go back to just hearing operator 1 by itself. So the shape control is your classic analog shapes in a variable format with a sine wave all the way on the left. So we start with a sine, we get to a triangle. Square is about right here, and saw is all the way over here. So you can of course do FM between operators with all the shapes, though classic FM you tend to stick with sine waves. So you've got CV over shape and ratio. So these pretty much behave just like turning the knob here would. The ratio you can also get some interesting kind of chiptune sounds out of. I'll just demonstrate that really quick. If we kind of move fast, you get kind of square edge sounds and whoa, okay, interesting. So anyway, you get the idea there. So it's got some sound design potential outside of FM. In addition to all the classic wave kind of analog shapes you expect from an analog oscillator, we can also use the lock switches here to, they're currently locked, and that's what gives us the kind of phase locking we need for FM. If we switch it into free state, ratio and detune now become a coarse and fine for that operator, which is distinct from now that it's free, it's ignoring the master tuning. And then in this mode, this free mode, ratio is actually also a volt per octave. So if we switch all 4 oscillators into free mode, we've basically got 4, and leave all the modulation off, we basically got 4 oscillators for analog subtractive patches if we want. Of course, the modulation matrix still works in this mode, and you get some kind of interesting, gnarly textures out of that. So this is sort of like FM without the phase locking. And you kind of get the idea, it can get pretty crazy. So that's another interesting way to use the module. So I'm going to go back into that sort of lock mode just to kind of show you how I reset it. So if I'm trying to do like a classic FM kind of patch, I'll just start here, which I sort of refer to as the neutral position. All the switches in lock state, detune at 12 o'clock, ratio at 12 o'clock. That's how I begin my design. Other interesting features we've got here, we've got an additional, you might be wondering what this additional row of modulation sends is. So we've got an audio rate FM input here with its own set of sends. So the way, and a trim here, so if the signal's a little too hot, the red LED will indicate that for you, and you can back it down, attenuate it a little bit. What I like to use this for is taking a phase lock operator output from the module, running it through the rest of the rack, and feeding it back in. So I can still get that harmonic result out of FM, which comes from that tight phase locking. So, process through any other aspect of your rig and back in you can very often maintain that relationship and get a harmonic result. Of course, you can do wilder, crazier, and harmonic things as well.